I might skip it for now. I will share it in now just so that it doesn't flash for later.
I just added you to the Twitter space, Greg.
Okay, cool. Oh,
or invited you.
Yep. Well, hi everybody. We are back. We were having technical difficulties, and I apologize in advance. And so, if you don't get enough time with Jen, it is all my fault. But welcome back to episode 26. It's the final episode of the year, so we're excited to have here Jen Lee from Backseat VC, because like I don't know why my head keeps going to backstage, but I did it wrong a couple of times, so we'll get through it. But in any event, for now, Jen, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We just excited. We were super excited. Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me. I actually didn't realize that this was going to be the last show of 2021. So
you're the last guest. You're the last guest. We are going to have a party tomorrow or next week.
Exciting.
Yeah. So, so we'll figure it out. But, in case you don't know who we're talking to, Jen, can you give everyone a little bit about you and just like, who you are and what you've been doing?
Well, Greg, before that, people can't hear the conversation on Twitter Spaces because you're not on Twitter Spaces.
Oh, whatever. Twitter Spaces.
Really everything's piped through you, man.
It's not a problem for me, honestly. All right, go ahead, Jen. Please go.
You're just having all the issues today.
I know.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know exactly where to start. I feel like it's one of those things where it's like long story, but I guess I'll start at the beginning. I'll wind it all the way back to 2010, and that's when like I guess I first started as a quote unquote creator, which was not really used at all back in the day. So back in 2010, that's when I started basically doing a lot and being a part of the whole like DIY like maker community that was like really huge back then. So I was super involved in that space and created a lot of my own content as well. So that was really cool. I actually mainly did it around food. So I had a food blog that was like all about different recipes, but also did a bunch of stuff with like the maker and DIY space. Fun fact, I actually used to have the #1 Google search result for how to make homemade croissants. Since then, Google has kicked me off the #1 spot for sure, but it was a lot of fun while it existed. But I think that's really what kicked me off in this whole journey. And then since then, I think content has always been something that I did for myself for fun on the side. But as like my career and like professional, I guess, aspirations grew, that's what I pursued tech and startups and kind of did that more as a full-time thing while content was always something I did on the side. So I guess fast forward from 2010 all the way 10 years later to 2020, when the pandemic happened, I found myself with some extra time on my hands as like a silver lining, I guess, and kind of wanted to like get back and kind of see what's going on in the space, and very quickly realized that there was a lot of things that I'd been following in its own individual buckets. But once I looked at it as a whole, that's what we now, I guess, are calling the creator economy. So basically that kind of led me to where I am today, and with a couple different things. So one, last year I started the Discord, the community that you referenced earlier. So a space for the creator economy, passion economy, where founders, investors, creators, writers, anyone interested in this space can come together, learn from each other, meet each other, and talk. I'm really proud of it because it really just started off as me listening to Lee Jin and Nathan Boschez's podcast, or show rather, called Music Creation. And I was on the call and I was like, I really want to meet the other people who are also watching this content at the same time. How do I do that? So I literally just spun up the Discord, and thank goodness Lee and Nathan were like very open.
So there was no formal association here. You just were like a fan.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I like checked with them to make sure it was okay, as in like, oh, like, do you mind? Like, I don't know if you had a like a plan to do this yourself, but they're like, no, go for it. Like, we're happy to like help like tweet it out. So they did that a lot in the beginning. But I think it's really cool to kind of see it grow beyond the show. Like if you're in the Discord community, we talk about literally everything under the sun, and it basically adopts and adapts rather to all the different trends that have been going on too. And I think what I'm most proud of is that it's still really active over a year later. I think that's one of the tough parts about building a community is actually maintaining it and keeping it engaged. So really happy with how that went.
Yeah.
So,
well,
I mean,
I was just going to say that it was really interesting because we did have the Passion Economy Pals Slack like at the same time, right? Like that this sort of came up. And yet, by the way, I was a member of that. I spent all my time in music. I don't ever go in the other one anymore, really, right? Like, so I thought it was so interesting. I assumed it was like Lee's thing, but then I remember seeing your original tweet. The first time we ever DM'd was when I was like, "Hey, my invite link is not working."
I know, I remember that. I was like, "Oh, that's very strange." Yeah, no, it was definitely like without Lee and Nathan, the Discord wouldn't exist like without their support. But yeah, it was just like I was watching, I think it was the show with Joe from Stir. So I was like, oh my God, Joe said so many cool things. And like Lee and Nathan had really a lot of hot takes during the episode. I'm like really excited about it. And I want to debrief with other people who watched it at the same time. So that was like one of the first things that we talked about. And then from there was so much news. And then before, like basically a month in, I was like, wow, there's a lot of crypto people joining. James Yeung from Collabland brought a lot of them over. So I was like, oh, we need an event. So like everyone's like asking these crypto folks so many questions. Like let's host our first ever event. And then I was like, what should I call it? I'll call it tea time because I feel like that could be fun. Like it just feels very like casual and like informal. So our first ever event was like about like NFTs and social tokens back like in November of 2020. So I know like NFTs have been around forever, but I feel like it didn't really hit its stride until like February 2021. So I feel like we kind of like gave our members like a 3-month little bit head start, you know?
Yeah.
So what is the what are some like takeaways from like this year plus journey, right? I mean, it's like if there's one thing that, like, did you set out in your course of your career, you know, you've kind of done all these things. You've worked with Justin Kahn, and you went on this podcast, and you create this Discord server, and then it kind of just took on a life of its own, right? And like, is that something? Did you ever think that it would get to where it is now? And what have you learned from this entire journey so far?
Yeah, I think for me, I think this is also advice I also give to people as well, which is like, I think that I pursue things honestly because I'm like interested in it. And I pursue things that give me a lot of energy and
You'll get
try.
nowhere in life doing that. Just
Yeah, exactly. I feel like by bringing the energy and by being like inherently excited for doing what you're actually doing without really worrying about the outcomes, I think is actually something that has like guided this whole journey for me. Like 10 years ago, like I was like literally like in high school. I was like didn't really like, it was like, oh, this is fun. I like meeting people and like people are like liking the stuff I'm posting, and then I would have no idea what lead to what I'm working on now. So I think like pursuing things that give you energy makes it so that you also don't burn out as easily, because it's not like you're doing it for a particular like end goal. It's not just like a means to an end, but rather like the journey itself is like part of the process. But lots of different learnings. I can kind of go on, but I think I would bucket them in a couple of different ways. I think number one, a lot of learning is about like how to build an engaged community. Like a lot of people, after I created the community and kind of grew it, like reached out to me to kind of get advice about growing their own community. It's such a big thing that people want to learn how to do now. So I always am happy to kind of give tips there. I actually wrote a tweet thread about it with kind of like the key things I think people should do. So a lot of like learnings in the community bucket. Working with Justin, which I guess I didn't mention earlier, but yeah, I've been working with Justin also for like the past year on basically all things YouTube, TikTok content. We also do a bunch of like special projects too, which I'm super happy like he's always game for, such as our NFT drops earlier, and we have also a whole bunch coming up as well. So lots of learnings about content and like what it actually means to like be behind the scenes, how to think about that. And then I would say the third bucket, like I'm super passionate about tech and startups in this space in general. So I think it's really cool where I feel like I'm a product person at heart. So I always love like tweeting about these like new product ideas I hope people build one day. So I think that there's a lot of really interesting things there where like sharing ideas and being able to generate momentum around it, I think leads to some really cool things. So we can dive into whatever makes sense.
But I think like in terms of the like I want to I'm certainly I think most of the show will be dedicated to the music creation and everything else there. But I want to take a little bit of time and talk about working with Justin. Like he's probably one of the earliest, I guess, the earliest creators that kind of really went mainstream, right? I mean, he created Justin TV, and everything like that. And what is the what has that experience been like? Like what have you taken away from working with somebody who's kind of been in web 1 to web 3, like kind of really helped shape these three eras?
Yeah, definitely. So working with Justin, first of all, is great. I think he is so open-minded and basically I think like you always hear this term like bias for action. And I think he's like always open, like that combination is like really crucial because he basically is so supportive of what we come up with. So working with Justin, I think I learned a couple different things. I think one, I think for people out there who are like, oh, like, how do I get these opportunities? Like, how do I reach out? I think you should just like go and shoot your shot. So people always ask me, like, oh, like, how did you get this opportunity? Like, did you know him before? Like, was one of your friends like friends with him? Like, was it in like inside contact? Like, actually, none of it was true. I basically listened to him give a talk in the Discord community. And then after he gave a talk, he like mentioned that he needed help with his podcast. So I messaged him. I was like, "Hey, like I really love your talk. I saw that you needed some help with your podcast. Here's like why I think that I can be really helpful to you." So I sent him like all like different types of like content that I've done in the past. And then including my food blog. So then the very first DM that I ever got from Justin back was like, "Wow, your wontons look really good." And I was like, "Oh wow, so what a great conversation starter." So when you reach out, I think you also got to be memorable in some way, shape,
Right.
or form. But basically, I think it was that. So after we kind of we were like going to get an initial call, I think one of the main things that I would recommend for people to do is that you have to come with like some value or some ideas that you can add to the table. So I basically told Justin, hey, like your podcast is great, but honestly, I think you need to get on YouTube and you need to get on TikTok, and like here's exactly how you would do it. And then honestly, I was actually surprised because he's like the original, like the OG live
Good thing you
streamer.
didn't suggest Twitch. Yeah.
I know. Actually, that was part of the plan, like part of the ideas, the initial set of ideas list too. But like he was like, "Oh, I'm actually a little bit like intimidated by video. Like I feel like it takes a lot of work." He's like,
Wait.
"Talk to the Twitch streamers who do this day to day," and I was like,
This is the guy that had a camera on him for 24/7.
I mean, if anyone would know how hard it is, it would
Yes.
That's
be
true.
you
That's
know?
So
true, yeah.
it's fair that he was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to go back down that road again.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
it's
but maybe Justin's like, okay, he just likes the raw version. He doesn't want to do the post production. That's the hard
Right,
part. Like, I don't want to do the post production, the polished stuff now.
yeah, exactly. But I was like, don't worry. Like, I'll take care of everything. All you have to do is like sit in front of the camera and film. I'll even like send you like the links of like the cameras you'll need. So I
Right.
think it's one of those things where it's like number one, like go shoot your shot, but as like a 1A, like you also I think need to bring some value. Basically tell a person like why like you would be the one who would be best to work with and to basically provide and play to your strengths. So I think that's really cool. I think number two, like one of the main things I think was really cool is that I think for me, like I like to think that I'm creative and resourceful, and that's kind of what I am able to bring to the table. So by being able to like play to my strengths, we were able to come up with a couple of cool ideas. One, I think it's just like how we always are experimenting with our content. So we always trying out different formats, going from story times to like roasting startup pitch decks to like life advice, and kind of doing like little clever things here and there to keep the content fresh and new. And then in addition to that, I think that creativity and resourcefulness like is something that me and Justin relate to each other with. So that really helped when we did our first NFT drop back in February of 2021, where we actually dropped our YouTube videos as NFTs on OpenSea. And that was a lot of fun, where it was kind of like in that first wave of like the NFT like excitement. So it
Can you
was really
explain
cool to
that a little bit?
tell
Can you unpack that a little bit, just how that worked for
people.
folks? Because I know a lot of people are like, how do I do this stuff, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny because I feel like February feels like back
It's
in
like
the
14
day.
years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like a few years ago. But basically, at that time, I think there was just like so many different, like the projects now are so much more sophisticated than back then. So please, everyone, don't judge. We were just trying to figure things out. But we thought it was really cool, the idea of when we first launched a channel, people would comment and they'd be like, "Oh my god, like I can't believe I'm here before like 10,000 subs. I can't believe like I'm like the first comment, or like can't believe I found this channel so early." And they would joke, right? Because Justin is a investor now, and he is for Goat with Robin. That's like the firm that he has, he like works on. And what I think is really funny is that people would joke in the comments and say, "Oh, like I wish like." I'm angel investing in Justin's like YouTube channel by subbing at like 500 subs because it's going to grow like I know it. And I was like,
Right.
"Oh, that's really cool." I feel like there could be something fun where it's like, why not? What if you have like a badge to kind of prove like how supportive you are? So that kind of kicked things off, where I jokingly like literally on Canva made a like congrats on 10K, because we got like 10K after 18 days, which I thought was really cool.
Wow.
Sent it over to Justin, and I was like, LOL, like I made a like non-NFT because it was literally just like something I sent over. And then we're like, wait, like what if we actually did an NFT drop? So that basically led to it. And the thing is, we wanted to do it right. So that was actually how I met a lot of people who I know in like the Web3 space now, like Jess from Seed Club, James Yeung from Collabland. I feel like they're like my trusted
Mm.
like confidants in this space, because I was like, I don't want to just do it. Like I think a lot of people at the time were doing it as a cash grab, but I was like, how do we make it so we can like build value wherever the person who wants to participate ends up being. So I wanted to make sure there was value for people who are actually buying the NFTs and holding it. I wanted to make sure there was value for people who were bidding on the NFTs. I wanted to make sure there was value even if you were just observing and kind of just like looking on. So a couple of things that we did that I thought was really cool, and that Justin was just like super excited about too, and kind of speaks to like how open he is to experimenting and trying out different things, is every bid was like entered into a $10,000 like ETH giveaway. So regardless of you actually ended up holding an NFT, you were like entered for a chance to win 10K, which I thought was
Mm.
really cool.
That's cool.
Number two, if you actually got an NFT, we made sure there were like one of ones and one of many. So we had like 150 that people could buy. You were invited to what we called like our like certified Justin Con Stories holders like call. So the idea is that you would be able to like give feedback, talk to Justin, kind of like Q&A sessions, and kind of be a part of like a mini community that didn't meet like, it's not like a community like Music Creation is, where it's like
Mhm.
all the time thing, but rather you like get together once in a while and kind of have that FaceTime. So I thought that was really interesting. And then even like the buying experience, like doing it on the auction base, kind of like the different drops and the different types of things that we had going on as we were doing it, creating content alongside it, was like all part of the experience. And I think that's what people forget, which is like an NFT isn't just the NFT itself, like what you actually get to own, but you get to, it's part of the experience. It's part of the fact that you're able to say and meet other people who have like similar interests and be a part of the community and kind of take part in the whole thing is part of like what you're buying basically.
Wow. Greg, you got anything? Or do you want me to ask?
Yeah, I guess. Well, I guess. Can you? That's a tremendous amount of trajectory, I guess, like in a short sort of period of time. And I know like it's been a number of experiments, right? And to some degree, everyone's still experimenting, right? Like no one's like solved or figured out per se anything here. Do you see this sort of quickening though sooner or later, like into like repeatable things, like or programs that you think like, or you recommend, like for builders, putting stuff together, that they should be thinking about doing now? Like you're like, hey, we tested this model, maybe Justin doesn't want to do it all the time, but it was a viable one, or do you think it's still like kind of early and do you encourage just more experimentation? I mean, obviously I think you should still experiment, but always.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you have to have a balance, but in general, like if you're okay, I think I would have different advice depending on who the persona is. So I think if you're a creator, I would definitely recommend to like build up your like super fans, like build up that base and like have a really close relationship with them and like experiment along with them. So I think what is really good framing for this is actually what Colin Samir had talked about in one of their previous videos, which is the idea, the difference between a creator that is like ideas based versus like relationship based. And both types of creators are very valid. And there's creators who are huge in both spaces, but you have to know yourself, or at least for me, like I have to know like what Justin would be like better, like of the two, better at building an audience in. I think for us, it's like being that relationship based creator. We're like building that relationship with the fans. So I think the idea is that as long as we experiment within that, I think it makes a lot of sense for us to continue to do so. So it's one of those things where it's like experimenting makes it so that your audience gets something new each time and kind of can see things like evolve over time. And then we also double down on things that we know will work. So for example, roasting startup pitch decks, we've done multiple times now just because it's such a like a fan favorite at this point in time, even though that's actually something for our super fans, because honestly, in order to reach a more generalizable audience, there's probably more differentiated topics that we'll probably talk about and kind of keep moving towards. So it's one of those things where it's like you got to find what makes you different, and the way you find it is by like understanding who your super fans are, and then you have to figure out like where you want to go, and then you experiment to get there.
Do you see anything, and I guess this is probably more like an outlook for 2022 and beyond, based on your conversations with and your involvement with Justin, and also what you're seeing on the Means of Creation Discord? Are you seeing any type of trends or technologies that, like, because we're kind of very much inundated by all these new technologies that are coming out of the woodwork right now, the link in bios to the crypto, to the tokens, to whatever, right? Some of them are, as we know with tech trends, some are great, most of them will be misses. Are you seeing any that are kind of really will stand out in the next year or beyond, that like will actually have legs?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like no one really knows for sure. But if I
Right.
had to take a guess, I feel like there's several that I would probably highlight. I think number one, I think creators are gonna go more and more international. So I think what was really cool about the popularity of Squid Game is that I think it was one of the like first time in the US that something was so mainstream but it was actually watched with subtitles. And I think that actually shows the potential of how creators will really be able to really go international, where creators that other countries know and love will become creators that people in the US will know and love, and vice versa. And I think like a lot of people probably will call out examples where like Mr. Beast launched his Spanish channel and that is taking off. For Justin, like we actually launched on Douyin, which is the TikTok, like China's TikTok as well. So I think there's a lot of potential for this like cross pollination where like creators can really break down borders, and hopefully the technology that helps this, which will be like the translation and like the dubbing and things like that, will kind of help that move a little bit more quicker than it has in the past. And also just I think like people are more open-minded to that in general. Kind of the globalization of content and creators I think is going to be really powerful. So I'm excited for that. And I feel like there's a lot of really interesting ways that you probably have already seen this trend. So it's like already here. I think we're just going to see it more formalized. Like for example, YouTube Shorts blew up in India and they like beta tested in India before they even brought it to the US. Like I said, like the Mr. Beast ones, things like that. I think that trend is gonna keep going.
Cool.
So I think that's one. And then I would say number two, I feel like one of the things that you wanted to talk about as well was like the whole concept of the ownership economy. So
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. I think there is like,
Can you
I feel like,
define it first, by the way? Just because I feel like everyone's got a like slightly different definition, and I'm always curious to hear how folks think about it.
so kind of how I think about it. So, okay, I would say, first of all, there's levels to this, or whatever that quote is, which is like, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, everyone. I think people have very like controversial and hot takes. And like, there's like literally a gradient of like how much this, or how this makes sense. Kind of how I think about it is, maybe I'm not sure this analogy will like land everywhere, but I do think that one of the things that is really cool when you think about compensation in general is the idea of like cash plus equity compensation. I think in the tech world that has been pretty like standardized, which is like when you work at a big tech company, you would almost expect that you would get cash plus equity. And sometimes there's actually tech companies who like have only paid cash and then gotten backlash that they aren't offering equity, that they aren't offering employees who help build the product, who help shape the company, don't get a piece of the company itself. And that, I think, is just what the ownership economy is, just more broadened to beyond W-2 employees. So the idea is that if you think it's wild that like you don't get to at least choose whether or not you get some stake at the company that you're working for, like I think the same principles apply just for people who aren't like full time. And the way that work is going, I think people more and more are going to have like side projects or working on multiple gigs or like doing a lot of different projects to like really support themselves and support their interests. I think the ownership economy just puts a name and like broadens that idea. And then I would say that crypto and Web3 help provide like a way in which you can do that when you don't have like a big tech company with like easy ways to like distribute shares and all of that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, by the way, I appreciate that you do say that because I think you're right. Like, I know I've had some reactions to this in the past. And I think it's because there is no sort of like voice that goes with like the way people write or message. Right. And so folks kind of stake a claim or a point in the gradient somewhere, and they sort of argue from there. Right. Like, and maybe it's that they do recognize all the downstream parts of it or the upstream parts of it, but like, they're like, I'm here, right? Like, and this is where it's going to be. And it's interesting. I actually find, an interesting dichotomy here, or sort of like, sort of almost hypocrisy, right? Is the creators fighting for this are equally, in my book, like, I'm not saying they're bad players per se, but they're almost equally involved in some of this, right? Like their success is built on their audience's participation and engagement, right? And we haven't rewarded, they don't like, that's not being rewarded downstream either, right? Like, so like everyone wants to shoot, Facebook and Twitter and all these guys, sort of in the face, right? But like, this is like a double-edged sword because I think like the creator side is also sort of starting to like have to come to grips with that truth about their existence as well.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I also think that, like, I think the ownership economy, like, should encompass that as well. I think that's actually one of those things where it's like you would hope, like, let's say, like, for example, I think this is the easiest one to understand is like, as an NFT project creator, you put out your art and you think it's really beautiful and your supporters are buying it to support you. I think the idea is that like any NFT project creator would be like, well, I hope the value goes up, not just for myself, but for the supporters, because maybe they'll be able to like gain value there that they can choose to liquidate whether or not. So I actually think it's like very much like, yeah, it's like ownership economy all the way down. I think it could definitely apply. I think that actually leads to my third quote unquote trend that I think is really interesting, or that I think is like kind of here to stay, which is like creators can be businesses as well. So I think the tools that you've seen that work for like enterprise SaaS will also be applied to creators as well. So I think a lot of the times where it's like analytics and taxes and like basically like who's automating or like helping creators do all the boring stuff so that they could actually focus their idea and actually creating. I think there's a lot of really interesting things there as well. So I think that it's like sounds really boring, but it's like the enterprise SaaSification of
Sounds
creators
wonderful to
who
me.
need it.
Well, I think you're right though, right? Because like if you want to achieve the kinds of gains that you imagine, you have to operate in some kind of structural model, right? Like that helps you achieve those goals, right? And that now I think the thing most creators probably want to hear is, and what I think I think we've talked about this in the past on the show, is that happens is just because you need to be a business doesn't mean that you need to be a business person, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, exactly.
right. And I think that's maybe the distinction where a lot of creators, like some people don't want to sell ads, right? Because they're like, I don't want to sell out. I'm like, but you want to do this for a living, right? Like, so it doesn't necessarily mean you're selling it. It also doesn't mean you're giving up your creativity per se to like be in the business part, but hopefully more operational things and things like that will come to fold to help people, do these things. And you just need to know enough not to get scammed by somebody, basically, right?
It's kind of interesting that we on the show, Greg, what has been like 4, 5, 6 months that we've done this show, and so far we started out with the premise of looking at the creator economy, and it's like, oh, it's easy, like just look at this creator economy, it's this easy thing, but it's just this monstrous phenomenon. And then we talk to other creators who we talk now. There's another subset called the passion economy, and now we have this other thing called the ownership economy. And it's like I'm very curious to see like where it all lays out. And Greg, I know you've done that infographic a few months ago. Kind of be interesting to see how all of it kind of boils together and evolves over time, and especially those that are, wow, you're quick on the draw, Greg.
It was already in the queue, so
I had no idea. And all of a sudden, boom, there it is. I'm like, wait.
I was like, wait, I think I uploaded that before.
I'm like, Greg, what is that like a Elgato, like a Stream Deck type of button you just have?
That one is just built into.
But it's like, would that evolve over time as we start to see more people participating in the creators and builders participating in discords like means of creation and other Slack servers or other communities, and seeing what they're doing and how they view where they are. Jen, I do find it fascinating that the ownership, because everything that you and Greg were just talking about, it's like, I think for those that are on Etsy, for example, right? I mean, there's like, sure, it's like you have the traditional a merchant to consumer behavior experience where you're like, okay, buy my, support small business, buy my goods, and that's it. It's just a one-to-one, it's a one-time transaction mostly. But then how do you, from a digital creator side, it's like, how do you do that without saying, oh, I don't want to do ads, I don't want to sell it? Well, you have to make money somehow, right? I would assume that you're not going to be like the Scrooge McDuck where you're just like, forget it, I'm just going to dive into my vault of coins and
I don't think Jen knows what the Scrooge McDuck reference.
Do you know Scrooge McDuck?
No,
DuckTales?
I
Oh no. Okay. Donald Duck's.
All right, don't explain it. You're just going to make it worse, right?
Anyways, but general preface: Scrooge McDuck, wealthy duck. He has this big vault of coins. He dives into it. Anyways, oh man, I'm gonna find this video and I'm gonna share it with you, Jen. Oh my god,
I'm sure it's vintage.
Wow. She just called us old.
Those are appropriate words for describing Ken, I would say.
Anyways, but the I think for creators, it's like they want to be able to capitalize on this, make reoccurring. They want to do that a subscription, but it's like, how do you do that if you're an artist, if you're a musician, if you're whatever? And it's like, I guess that's the power of an NFT. It's not just a JPEG. It's not just an image. Yes, you can, like how Justin does it. He can go and create a video, and yeah, he can get money off of the ads. But like, how does he continue that relationship and build that better rapport with his fans so that they feel invested, and so there's more of a community. So I guess ownership and community kind of go hand in hand more in more sense, as opposed to the ownership economy for brands, which is very much all commercialized anyways. Like, I think for the individuals, it's a different set. But I find it very, very fascinating. I kind of want to jump into the means of creation Discord and kind of dig a little deeper into that. You know, I put it on Twitter that I was like, I think when we first started the show and I was kind of getting my head around what's going on, Greg introduced me to a bunch of different resources, including the means of creation. I'm like, I don't know, like, what is your advice for somebody who's trying to figure this stuff out? They dive head into a community like this, and they're like, I don't know where to start, because it can feel overwhelming, right? Because there's a lot of insightful information you want to absorb everything, but it's just like, I wake up every morning, there's all these notifications, like I don't know where to go, what to start. You in a way, in an odd way, you kind of feel paralyzed. So what is your thought for someone who wants to be a part of these type of communities? How should they navigate the waters?
Yeah, so I think it's tough. I also think there's like tools that are being built to help solve this. But I think what I would recommend is that you can't be a part of everything. So I think number one, I think you have to be really good at managing your FOMO and figuring out like where you actually want to spend your time and like where you like really enjoy being. So it's one of those things where it's like you can't make friends with like everyone. You kind of like have like I feel like most people have like their core group of people and then they're like acquaintances with like a lot of other people that they still enjoy like being a part of and like hanging out with them. And I think that those principles really relate to community as well. So I'd be like pick a subset and try to figure out like where you actually want to be an active member on. The good thing is that a lot of Discords always have like a like if you're new, like start here or like onboarding channel or things like that. I would listen and like and check that out because I think most people have kind of like put together like
Those feels like the instruction booklets that come like in stuff though. Like
I know, but I do think it's a good place to start. But I think the main thing is actually the main thing about the community is that you want to get started talking to people. I think it's actually pretty easy to like be known in a community as long as you like actually participate. So what I would do is that number one, like put an intro in like any intro channel so then you can kind of like set the scene of like who you are. And then I would say for a community that you actually want to be active in, to kind of just select like a few channels where you are like active in like once a day, things like that. And just kind of look at it and see what other people are posting and kind of interact with them. Because as you actually become more active, it becomes easier to distill information because people will actually tag you in things that they think you find relevant. So I think that's pretty interesting.
Well, I'm moving to Miami. I wasn't going to, but I flew here 3 weeks ago to speak at a conference, and I haven't left yet.
I'm supposed to be on another call.
Oh no! I was like, who is that?
I'm actually supposed to go pitch Zealous right now, so like, I apologize. Jen, I just want to say thank you before I go. Ken, you can definitely close up, and I just to be sensitive of Jen's time, I don't want to hold her.
Yeah, we'll probably wrap it up right after this. Yeah,
but the only question I would leave before I go is just like what's next for the community, right? Like what do you hope as a curator, admin, moderator, operator, like to come from it? I'll watch this part in the video. I apologize, I'm going to run, but I'll see you in a second. Bye, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Ken, feel free to wrap up then. Thank you. Sorry, Wiz.
Bye.
All right, thank you so much, Jen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. So this is also a question that I feel like I struggle with answering as well, especially being in this like Twitter world, tech Twitter world, which is I feel like, or not everyone, so many people are always working on new things and like launching new things all the time. And I think it's really easy to get distracted by that and being like, oh, like I also need to work on something new, even if you actually internally don't know if that's going to be the best thing for you. But I do think working something new is exciting. So to be honest, to answer Greg's question, like what's next for the community, like honestly, like table stakes is like, I want to keep growing it and I want it to be as engaged. Like I want people to be as engaged as they are now and even more so as we like keep growing in the future. So the idea is just like, let's bring in more voices, let's bring in more people with more perspectives who are going to talk more so that we can have good conversations, meet more people, and kind of like learn and grow from that, and hopefully facilitate connections that will like stand the test of time. But the thing is, like, that was my initial goal from the very beginning. Like, nothing has changed. Just want to keep doing more of that. So I think that's really how you build momentum over a certain period of time, is like, you just got to keep going. Like, my content journey, I guess, technically is 10 years in the making, which I didn't even know was happening. But I think really good things, like, you kind of have to work in the shadows, take time, and enjoy along the way. So honestly, it's like more of the same. I think there's a lot more I can do to like keep it, to make it more engaging, do more events, for example, kind of help make sure the new people who are talking a bit more are engaged and kind of meet more people. But honestly, it's like more of the same thing, and we can always get better at it.
Yeah. So I guess we're at time here, but I wanted to kind of close with one thing, or I guess a question that we typically ask is like, what is your advice for those, because you've been on both sides. You're that you're straddling all sides of the kind of spectrum, right? I mean, as a creator, as someone that's as a builder, and as a just general observer of all these trends, what advice would you give to somebody who's like, hey Jen, like I want to build a startup, I want to do a startup, I want to reach these reach creators, but I don't know where to, like, how to start or what they really want. And yes, I can go and talk to them and hear what they want, but like, what advice would you give them in terms of how they should be thinking about the creator economy?
So I think number one, like, you have to, like you said, know your user. I think ideally, if you're passionate about this space, you might as well also be your own user. Like,
Mhm.
I think a lot of um, the insights that I am able to have is because I'm like, oh, like, I like experienced that as a creator myself. Like, I was no like the stuff that I'm a creator at. Like, we're definitely like way levels like below like any of these like huge creators, but you still kind of see the genesis of certain problems earlier on. And I think the reason why it's important is that as an entrepreneur, I think you have to be really good at like being creative, being resourceful, and being able to connect disparate ideas together, because that's what's going to help you form a unique insight that you can use to stand out from everyone else, because everyone else has their own set of experiences that they're drawing their unique insight on. So I think you got to do that and play to your strengths. So I would basically like sit down and kind of list out like what your different strengths are, what experiences you have like as a creator yourself, or having like observed any of them. Try to figure out how you like, what's the coolest way you could connect all of that together into something that you can actually build and have that stand the test of time. And I think that's the second thing, which is like, I think it's really important to just get started. People always get a little bit nervous about like releasing something or launching something. I think you can never launch like enough times. So you always got to think about like, what is the MVP? How do you actually keep an MVP like minimally viable, and just get started, get something out there to get some feedback. And I think with that, it honestly generally applies to a lot of different things, is to keep experimenting. But when you actually find something that people like, don't let other people distract you from like your goals and what you think your strengths are, because those are going to remain the same most likely.
Cool. So what surprised you the most about this year in the creator economy?
Oh, that's a good question.
I mean,
I
because we're at the end of the year, you might as well do some retrospective. It's like it's like, hey, is it that rally token, or that creator tokens have kind of really taken off to a certain degree? That NFTs have become this big hit. That link in bio tools are there. I don't know. It's like, I'm kind of hard to really grok what, like link in bio. Like, okay, they're low hanging fruit. They're the stickers of the Web3 era. Like, but what else? Like, what has surprised you the most?
I would say two things. I think number one, people always talk about how difficult Web3 is and like why and the UX is like terrible. And I agree, like there's so much room for improvement. But I think what surprises me is like how many people, especially creators, who are able to adapt super quickly and like release their own projects or like learn about the space or like make connections in the space. So I think it's one of those things where it's like never underestimate like highly motivated, creative, and like adaptable and flexible individuals to like get into any space that they find interesting. So I think that was surprising, like how fast people were able to kind of like learn about something and pick something up and really honestly be an expert in something because it's there's still so much to learn. I think everyone is like in a space where it's like, I definitely can't call myself an expert. There's so much more to learn, but there's also a lot of like, but if you are even learning about it now, you're still really early. So I think that's really interesting. And then number two, I think it's just like, or in general, over the past 2 years, it's been pretty exciting to see how many like newly minted creators there are. In the past, it was so much harder to be a creator. Like, for example, I had like a WordPress and like a whole bunch of like different things. I was trying to get like Mediavine to like get like banner ads and things like that.
Ooh,
But
banner
now
ads,
like
yeah.
everything is like all built into the platforms. Um, there's so many different ways to create regardless of like what type of person you are, whether you're better on video or whether you're not good on video, and or better on audio or just like photos, different types of content, like anywhere from comedy to food to like just like general entertainment, lifestyle, things like that. And I think TikTok and Clubhouse had a lot to do with it, which is like that was the first time in a while that I felt like new generation creators were like basically came up as a result. And that lowering of the barrier to entry is really exciting. I think that was definitely something where the scale of it was something that I think was surprising, where it's like, like initially, I think everyone was like, oh, you have to have these set of skills before you can be a creator. But now you can really just start creating and build an audience seemingly on anything that you can rally an audience around.
Cool. Well, Jen, I want to be cognizant of your time, but and thank you so much for joining Greg and I, or at least joining me for the entire show. Greg for partially of the show. Um, and for those that want to know more about the means of creation Discord, where could they go to check it out? Is there a URL for them to check out?
Yeah, so honestly, the easiest way, because like I guess and I still have not set up a redirect here, but the easiest way is if you go on Twitter and you look up myself, so at backseat VC, and you go to the pinned tweet at the top. That will take you to the Discord invite link, and then from there you can join. And I would recommend to introduce yourself and to drop your Twitter link, and then you'll get started and start reading all the different channel or all the different messages that are coming through. My favorite channel is Resources and Reads. I feel like that's the one that has like really exciting news. There's always a lot of like conversation happening there, lots of really cool people to meet. So that's what I would recommend.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And we will talk to you soon. And if you would like to join us for our holiday party, Greg apparently has a holiday party planned for next week. I have no idea what's going on. I'm apparently just showing up. But we'd love to have you on the show again.
Yeah, send me the details. And this has been super fun. Like, thank you so much for having me, Ken and Greg. I'm honored to be able to spend the time.
Cool. Well, thank you. And well, I'm just going to wrap this up now. All right. Thanks, Jen, for joining us. We will be back next week for another episode of Creative Economy, where we will have the aforementioned holiday party. But for those that are interested in the news, on Fridays, we will have Creative Briefs at 8 a.m. Pacific time, where Greg and I will recap what's happening in the creator economy. We have a doozy of a selection this week. Especially when it comes down to Instagram and TikTok and Clubhouse and God knows whatever company decides to announce something around the creator economy space. So tune in at 8 a.m. Pacific. We will be here for Creative Briefs. Then we will be off for the rest of the year, where we will have, but then we'll be back in January with our first guest on January 5th being the people behind LinkedIn's creator program, specifically their accelerator and their global creator program. So looking forward to having that conversation with them to learn more about how LinkedIn can be used for the creator economy. All right. Thanks very much. And I will see you next week. Or actually, I'll see you on Friday for Creator Briefs. See ya.